How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. I completely missed the 1 o'clock start time as I was researching something for one of the questions that someone asked in the chat. So hopefully everyone is doing really well today. We're going to have a kind of more open conversation than we have done in the past with these live streams. So this is a much more just open AMA session. I do have a bit of information that I am going to share with the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX, primarily around the autofocus update that was part of the firmware released a few weeks ago, because I didn't get to that last week. So I've got my S5IIX hooked up here so we can run through the menus. I can talk about it, show you all where the stuff is in the menus, and then we can kind of address some questions there. But as I mentioned, this is just an open AMA session, so it's going to be a lot of my face on the screen, just reading the chat, answering y'all's questions. So, that being said, if you have questions for today's stream, make sure to tag at LUMIX USA, as you can see some people doing in the chat. It helps me get through the questions and see the ones that you want answers to. With a format like this, if you don't put at LUMIX USA, it's less likely that I'm going to see your questions, so just make sure to add that in there. And then, yeah, we'll kind of get through as many of them as we can today, and I'll get you as much information as I can today with these kinds of questions. So, before we go too deep into that, I want to remind those in the US about LUMIX Pro Services. We have LUMIX Pro Services Red and Platinum available. The Red tier is free if you've just purchased a LUMIX camera. Make sure to get yourself registered and set up for that service. You get 3-year warranty, or it adds the 3-year warranty on top of what you got out of the box with the camera. So it's decent, good peace of mind for just basic warranty repair stuff. If you're somebody who likes to have a little bit higher level of service and support on the back end, make sure to take a look at the Platinum tier that we have available. That is a paid level service. And in addition to the 3-year warranty extension, you also get 2-day repairs with next-day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs, annual sensor cleanings, lens calibrations, firmware updates, all the stuff that maybe you'd rather us do than you do yourself. And then you also get access to our membership hotline. That is a direct phone line that is available from 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you have access there if you're someone who doesn't like using chat or email to communicate. What else am I missing on that? I think that's primarily it. So, yeah, if you're interested in either of those services, you can either use the QR code that's right below me right now, or we have a link down in the description that has that info for you as well. So, let's kind of just dive right into this. We'll do a bunch of questions, and then we'll talk about the firmware update as far as autofocus improvements go. And then I want to point out some various different things in the firmware update, because I've seen a couple of people making review videos online that are close but are missing some crucial pieces as far as what you would have the camera set up for based on old logic. So let's see here. Yannick says, I have a question for the G9 Mark II. I don't understand why the 4K 10-bit is only 72 megabit, while the 4K 8-bit is 100 megabit. Shouldn't the 10-bit files be more heavy than the 8-bit? Well, Yannick, I actually have my G9 Mark II right here to double check this, and when I put the camera into MP4, which is what you are referencing here, which is where the 72 megabit files work, the 10-bit is 100 megabit. There is also a 72 megabit option for 10-bit, depending on the frame rate options chosen. You do also have 8-bit at 100 megabit, so there are various different options. It's when you look at the 60p is where you see that it is going to be that 100 megabit. When you're in 4K 8-bit at 100 megabit versus dropping into 24p at 10-bit, you do get 72 megabit for that. Part of this, to kind of think how to kind of explain this, is that the bit depth and the bit rate don't always have to go hand in hand. So 10-bit doesn't always have to be higher data rate than an 8-bit file. In some cases, it's really tied to what it's designed for. Knowing that MP4 is not as popular as a recording format anymore, at least as far as a wrapper goes. The vast majority of machines can support MOV, which is where you get the really kind of much more flexible functionality with the camera. That's just the bit rates to the image quality targets that we have for each of those various options. And especially in MP4, you start to look at, well, MP4, knowing that it has to be more cross-compatible. Typically, higher bit rate means that it's going to be harder on editing machines, or in our case, because MP4 is the video file that you can transfer to a mobile device, you also run into some, not restrictions, but more boundaries that you want to work in to make sure that the experience is kind of even across the field. So those that are going to be using a mobile device to edit with versus those that may be using a computer, higher frame rate, or not higher frame rate, higher resolution and bit rate can actually counter each other when it comes to certain platforms. So that's why it's designed the way it is. Let's see here. Sixtus says, with the G9 Mark II, is it possible to keep IBIS on while turning off OSS of the 12-100 f4 from OM system? The G9 stabilization is rated higher than the lens. I realize you can't use both of them simultaneously. So any system, at least as far as the Micro Four Thirds goes, because it's an active communication between the two, there isn't a way to toggle between optic stabilization and sensor shift stabilization. When you go into the S series, and unfortunately I can't 100% verify this with the Micro Four Thirds because I don't have any OM lenses. On the S series, you have an option in the menu to turn, to change that, to basically say use Lens IS. But even in that case, it's going to use Lens IS. It will disable the body stabilization for situations like that. And in those cases, it's usually in longer telephoto lenses that you're going to be working with that system. So that's just how that system is built. That's just what it's designed to do at. Okay. Another question that actually I want to address in this, because I thought it was actually kind of funny, and I can't tell if maybe the question is a bit facetious. It says, when is Panasonic going to make a high-speed camera that can do good quality 2K at 1,000 frames per second for $6,000? The reason I want to answer this one is name another camera that can do that at that price point. 1,000 frame per second cameras, for those that don't know, and again, this is why I want to address this one. 1,000 frame per second cameras, you're starting to talk into like the Phantom series, so Phantom high-speed cameras, and those are like 60 grand. So you're you're not going to see a $6,000 camera that can do 1,000 frame per second in 2K that's of good production quality outside of like machine vision cameras that are designed for production facilities, stuff like that. So okay, let's see here. Thank you, YouTube, jumping around. There we go. Emerald says, do you know if the new DJI Focus Pro handle and LiDAR Pro supports the internal AF on LUMIX cameras like the RS3 Pro gimbal does? Yes. I did have a conversation with the team over at DJI during NAB, and they did confirm to me that, yes, the LUMIX cameras, I didn't get a list of which LUMIX cameras, but I would assume that if it works, at least the way they worded it to me, was that if it works on an RS3 Pro with the LiDAR attachment, it will work on the Focus Pro with the LiDAR attachment. The difference being that their compatibility chart or statement that they make on their website is for the Bluetooth connectivity. Our system is connected through USB, so you still have to connect the camera via USB to the handle, and then the LiDAR unit to the handle through USB as well, and it'll work. You won't need the external focus motor for that particular unit. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. Jim says, hi, Sean, how are you? I was wondering if you had some answers about LUMIX hoodie John Simo showed on Reddit a while back. It would give you some free marketing. Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback about that. We are looking into that kind of stuff to be able to put up for sale. But I have no idea when that kind of item would be something that you could purchase from us. My best recommendation for updates on things like that is to basically get subscribed to the YouTube channel if you're not already. Follow us on social platforms. Get on our newsletter, the stuff on the shop.panasonic.com stuff. Because if and when we do stuff like that, you'll get a notification on one of those platforms about it. But as of right now, merch like, the shirts that we wear at trade shows or that I wear on the streams, or the hoodies that we've had for special events with various different photographers and videographers aren't something that's available in the public. If you see people online telling you that they've got this merch from Panasonic, 9 out of 10 times it's fake. Unless it comes, or, always ask me if you think, hey, this looks a little sketchy, or is this right? I'm happy to tell you whether or not we're doing it or not. But as of right now, we don't sell merch. So, yeah. Let's see here. Where was I? Ton says, why doesn't the S5II automatically detect and focus on human when you set it on 10-second timer? That's a good question. I would have to take a look at that because I don't use the timer, so I don't have an answer for you. But I will be able to ask. Yeah, I'll ask about that. It's my guess is that because that system focuses when you first press the shutter button. So the timer will focus when you half press, and then when you press the shutter button, it enables the timer, and it doesn't refocus at that point. But as I said, I will do a little bit of testing on the S5II and using the timer mode. It's just not a common mode that I use on the camera, so I don't really have an answer for you yet. Let's see here. Pete says, hey, Sean, is this where you give us release dates for all the 2024 cameras? Funny. Nice. Even if I could, I like having a job, and yes, so. Let's see here. How annoyed will you be if we start asking about gyro and stabilization? None of the questions annoy me. You can ask whatever you want to ask. It's whether or not I can give you an answer or not. Gyro data, we've heard a lot of people asking about, hey, can you add gyro data for those that want to use it? I know that it is something that we've passed over to the engineers. I just don't know the feasibility of it yet. So yeah, I mean, if that's something that you guys really want to see, definitely keep asking. I may not always respond to the comment or the question about gyro data or various different components of things that you want to see updated, but by you putting those comments in the chat, in the comment field after the video is posted, it gives us the place where we can tell our engineering and our development team, like, hey, here is what the users are asking for. You can reference this, you can watch, go through the live stream, follow the live chat replay. But ultimately, it does make it easier if you take comments of features that you want to see and put them in the comments after the video, because those stay static and someone doesn't have to scroll through the entire video to see if they got a question or see what someone was talking about. That just makes it easier for us to reference when we're talking with them about future updates and things that y'all want to see in the cameras. So yeah, definitely never get annoyed with any of the questions that y'all ask. That's why I do these things. Chumos says, also, I was wondering if there's an issue with Godox flashes in constant preview. It doesn't work, and I was having some low shutter effect. So yeah, this is tied to one of the other questions that was actually asked, but I don't think the LUMIX USA tag was added on it. The question was asking about how when you have the camera set and you're using focus and it's in a lower light scenario, when you half press the shutter, you see the screen get brighter, and then it goes back to the exposure that you were setting for. when it comes to determining exposure compensation or constant preview for things like flash or low light photography and videography, there are two trains of thought when it comes to the way those systems work. There's one, which is prioritize the exposure preview over focusing speed, or flip it backwards and prioritize focusing accuracy and speed over the split second of having to shift to brighten up the exposure. In the LUMIX cameras, we have taken for years, we take the stance that the focusing is the more important part of that particular situation. Why that becomes, I guess, maybe a little more relevant these days is that, one, we now have PDAF, as obviously everybody knows, but PDAF is a system that if you want accuracy with it, you need to feed the sensor light. So if you are shooting in low light and you're in, say, manual, and you have your lens stop down, you are not going to get as fast or as accurate focus as you would if the system can open the lens, or open the aperture up, flood the sensor with light for the time that it needs to acquire the target, then stop back down so that it can then track based on depth of field and where the pixels are activated for PDAF. Trade-off there being that you get that momentary shift in the preview of the exposure, but if you look at the tools on your camera, it's going to tell you what your exposure values are. Yes, you're going to see a bloom as the lens opens up to flood the sensor with light to gain faster and more accurate focus, but your actual recording settings aren't changing. So when you're recording, you're only going to see that happen when you're in standby, about to record, or when you're in stills and you're focusing before you capture the still. Once you keep your finger half pressed down on the shutter, you're telling the system to run, and it acquired that initial point, and then now it's tracking from that acquired point based on, where that object moves in the frame. With PDAF systems, and this is something that I think many people have forgotten about with PDAF because we think it's a magic bullet that fixes all autofocusing. The flip side of it is that PDAF, as I said, requires light to be able to tell distance. So when you start stopping lenses down, f11, way down into the range there, PDAF systems become less accurate. This is true for all camera brands. I don't care what influencers say. I don't care what someone who works in the company says. I'm trying to come at this from a pure technical perspective, is that PDAF requires light. If you go back to the days of DSLRs where you had separated PDAF systems, there were actually ratings on what f-stop PDAF systems worked. It was usually around f8, and it was usually only the center focus point is what worked when you were on DSLRs. Modern mirrorless cameras have gotten better over the years because now the accuracy of those sensors, of those photodiodes or the phase diodes that are used has gotten better, but that's still, you have to flood them with light. So you have choices there. Our choice is to do it the way we are doing it now. Like anything, as people let us know and as more and more users are adopting into the LUMIX system, which is ridiculously large numbers, as we've been with these cameras for a little over a year and a half now. As more users come in, we're not saying that we are never going to change it, but that's what our system is. So yeah, that's just how it works. And then, yeah, with flashes, it's the same thing. You have a choice. It's either you try to mimic the exposure with a flash, which honestly, even at that point, I personally never understood what constant preview actually helps you with flash, because flash, you are controlling the light, but it's only for a burst. So if you're shooting in manual, you're going to have your set exposure anyway, and the scene's going to be the way it is. You can't mimic a flash scene through software because of how you might be shaping light. That's kind of, there's different logics to the way constant preview stuff like that works. When you start getting things like low shutter effect, that's telling you that, well, one, you've got low shutter effect with constant preview. That's something that you can change by going into the gear icon and then going down to the constant preview menu on the newer cameras. and then changing the effect to aperture and aperture for manual and aperture priority mode. This will remove that shutter speed effect, but it will also change how constant preview works. Our constant preview is a very literal constant preview. What I mean by that is that if you set a 1 second exposure and you want our constant preview, you're getting a 1 second exposure refresh of the screen every single second. It's going to refresh because you are asking the system to show me what my image is going to be like. That includes shutter speed. It's just the logic of the way our system is built. So, CJ says, are there any updates to remove the unused channel 3 and channel 4 audio when not in use? I hardly use 4 channels of audio. Removing these would help with editing for clients. It is something that has been asked a number of times. I know the engineering team is looking at that to see, is there a way to make an adjustment for that system. But at this point, I don't have any kind of update or, kind of firm one way or another for anybody yet. Let's see here. Not sure if your question was completely typed out there, Derek, but yeah. Where was that question? 007 says, hey Sean, thanks for another live LUMIX Live on the S5II. Could you ask the engineers if it's possible to change the LUT on JPEGs afterwards? It would be great to cycle through your favorites. Interesting question. So, do I have a card in my S5 Mark II X? I do. Because I do want to show y'all something that we do have here. Take a couple of pictures, make sure I'm in there. Cool. So, if you are on any of the cameras and you've done real-time LUT, one of the things that many people don't know is that if you go into the menu for playback, and you go down into the playback menu, you'll see raw processing. As long as you shoot raw and JPEG, in this case, of course, because I'm connected to the HDMI, it's not going to let me. Raw processing on the camera, make sure my audio is going. Yeah. So raw processing on the camera actually does let you change the, where did that go? Hey, there I am. Raw processing on the camera does let you change the LUTs that you had applied to the camera. So you are not stuck with the one shot that you took and the JPEG being in the one LUT. When you do raw processing, you can just go in there, and then one of the options now is LUT. So you can change the base color profile, you can change the LUT that was used on that, and then just have the camera export out another JPEG that has the different LUT on it. So that does exist in the cameras. It's just you want to make sure you're shooting raw and JPEG at the same time. Mr. E says, simplified question. Why does Vlog with a LUT and real-time LUT display differently? Real-time LUT looks correct where Vlog has banding. External monitors and flip screen, can this be fixed with firmware? So, vast majority of the time, it usually means that the LUT that you're using for LUT preview, so Vlog View Assist, if you are seeing banding on the screen with Vlog View Assist, there's two things. Either the LUT that you're using is not correct for the gamut, so it could be something that maybe you're bringing it from like a Vlog L, or it's something that's used for the editing side versus a viewing LUT. Maybe it's a 65 point when the camera's really expecting 33 point at most. That can be some of the problems there with the LUT Vlog View Assist. Real-time LUT is a specifically patented thing that LUMIX does. This is our system that we've built. There are a lot of complexities to how our system works in what it does for real-time LUT, in the conversion of that LUT and the color profiles that you choose to create the look that is being created for the JPEG file. They are two completely different systems. So in a lot of cases, because you're looking at real-time LUT, it's a finalized piece, which means that it's applying it and it's actively converting the colors. So you're recording them recorded. Wow, you're recording them recorded. You're recording them converted. View Assist is literally just changing what the preview is on the display. So in that case, it's more dependent that the LUT is proper for the display that you're using on the camera. You make sure you're using viewing LUTs and not corrective LUTs or stylistic, 65-point LUTs on the camera. Typically, the camera won't even like when you put 65-point LUTs on here because they're huge. But that's where I would try first, Mr. E, for that. The real-time LUT system is a lot more reactive to the LUTs that you put on it. For the way the system works. Daniel, are there plans to update the S5 Mark II user manual to reflect the updated software? Let me double check here. So when firmware update is pushed for cameras, and I'm just pulling up the firmware update page, which if you haven't updated the firmware yet, at the bottom of in the description we have a link for it. Yeah, so let me see if I can share this. Do I have that scene still set up on my computer? I do. So, here is the firmware update for the S5 Mark II. So this is the page that you would go to get it downloaded. One of the things that you'll see is that when you get to the bottom of each of the sections, you'll see operating instructions for change of specification. This is the update that is put into the manual. So it's done by update when there's a big enough addition to the camera. So it does exist. It's on that actual page, and you do have access to it. Matt says, is there a way when using the XLR unit on the S5 to only record audio files and not video? Unfortunately, no. The whole purpose of the XLR, the XLR1 is that is the converter. So that's the AD converter that then injects it into the footage, and that's what its purpose is. So the whole concept is to record it to the video file and embed it in with the MOV file. If you need a separate track of audio like that, then it's still the traditional way of using an external recorder and then syncing them in post later. Yeah, our system just doesn't do a straight audio record. 007 says, would love to see 4K 120 on the S5IIX. Please pass this on to the engineers. See if it's possible. Thanks. I don't have to. It is not possible. The S5IIX, the sensor, doesn't have the readout speeds required for 4K 120 or 4K 60 from full sensor area, or for full sensor width. So those cannot happen. Those are physical things that cannot happen to the camera. I understand people want things like that, but it's not physically possible. So S5IIX, it's not going to get those things. Derek says, I've registered multiple cameras, most recently G9 Mark II, but never received a welcome kit or even real acknowledgement. What can I do? It's interesting, Derek. So with the LUMIX Pro Service program, assuming it's the United States that you've registered for, because I know other regions have kind of shifted what their systems have. But in the US team, if you've not received anything, yeah, that's kind of weird. Should have received a kind of like welcome kit, especially if you're in the platinum tier. In the red tier, I think you get the card in the mail. So a couple things, just double check, make sure that the addresses are right, that email address is punched in right, that shipping address is done right. If you're not able to get into the system, I think, let me double check here. LUMIX Pro Services. So if you go to the registration page. I guess the biggest thing is making sure that all the information's there. So if you log in with your email ID, just make sure you're obviously if you get the OTP, then you know that okay, you've got the email right. If you're not getting any of this stuff back from there, I think there should be an email that you can reach out to for that, to have them check in and see like what might be hanging it up, because it could be validation of the serial numbers and the receipt to show that they're valid purchases. Sometimes that stuff can get held up if things don't match. So Christy, will there be a fix for recording four simultaneous channels while two of them are blank? We addressed that question before. DJ, sup Sean, I smell great things in the near future. Let's go. This is an exciting time for Lumix, so yeah, it's always going to be a really nice future. Zizo says, AF question for stills. Should I choose AFF or AFC? They are very similar, if not the same. I will take pictures of performers doing body movements and stuff, kind of theatrical. So, if your camera has an AFF mode, which is something that we've kind of gotten away from in the newest generation cameras, the two systems run, while they sound similar, they are fundamentally different. AFF, so autofocus, I can't remember exactly what the AFF acronym stood for, because it's been that long since we've used it. AFF, the concept there was that it would continuous focus while the subject was moving, but if the subject stays stationary long enough, it locks to that point. What that means is that if you are photographing subjects that are going to be moving pretty consistently, just flip it to AFC or keep it on AFC, because AFF, you could run into a situation where the camera will focus, and if that person stays still too long, it locks, and then by the time they move, it can take a split second for the system to recognize that that subject has moved and then start focusing again. Where AFC, it's just always looking for focus. So hopefully that clears it up. Danny says, can Lumix allow Sigma APS-C lenses to let users select the image area video instead of being forced into APS-C mode? I think I'm safe in saying no. The reason for this, and while I understand, because the 18 to 35 is a lens that gets brought up all the time about this question, is that, well, it works without vignetting up to a certain focal length. Cool. It doesn't work on the full length of that lens. It is not designed as a full frame lens. That means when you are not using it in Super 35 or APS-C, you are using areas of that lens that are not considered usable in the design of the lens. So just because it's kind of that stance of just because you can doesn't mean you should. For those that want to use lenses like that, cool. There are adapters that there are dumb adapters that, I mean, obviously the downside there is you lose aperture control on the EF mounted versions that would let you do that. There are the tricks that people do to cover up contacts that would let you do that. From a brand perspective, that is not recommended even in the slightest. Because those lenses are not designed for full frame. They are designed from Sigma as APS-C lenses. There is a standard that is set for how communication works. If we decided to change that, there's a couple things that come out of that. One, we're breaking a standard that we're part of. Two, user experience goes out the door, because it won't be you that has to answer a question as to, why put this lens on my camera, why am I getting vignetting? It's us, and it's Sigma that have to get those questions. So because of that, no. Lenses that are APS-C are designed for APS-C. That's what they're built for. That's the area of the sensor that they're going to use. We're not going to change it to allow you to make that the full image area, because that's not the right thing to do. That is the incorrect way for keeping a standard and keeping a quality product to be maintained as it is described to work. So, Hopefully that answers that question. I know it's not what you want to hear, but that's what it is. Danny also says, also, do you know if DJI is working on wireless hot shoe adapter for the DJI Mic 2 camera adapter for Sony? That is something that we've asked the engineering team about, because I think that is an incredibly slick kind of integration for the microphone into the camera. And knowing that our camera can take the information through the hot shoe could be a really cool thing to have thrown in there. So, yeah. Let's see here. I want to look up this camera. All right. FreeFly Wave 2K. 4K 422, $7,000. Okay. All right, so as Lima says, there is a camera that can do 1440, does 2K at fast frame rates. Cool. That's not a camera market that we work in. So, yeah, that's probably not something we're going to do. While it's cool, it's an $8,000 camera with 2 terabytes of storage, and that's what you get, from what I can see here. It's an ultra specialty camera. It has no display on the back. You need a monitor for it. And if it works like other high-speed cameras that I've seen and worked with, you don't use them for cinematic recording. That's where you'd go to like a Phantom Flex 4K, things like that. But interesting camera, Lima. DJ says, where do you see LUMIX video codecs go next? Are there shooting modes and codecs you wish LUMIX cameras would have in the future? What about 12-bit video internal recording? Yeah, I mean, there's the things of like what we would want to see, and then there's the things of like, okay, this is what the industry is actually using, right? Obviously, everybody wants to see advancements in things like codecs, better performance, all that kind of stuff. If you go way into the weeds, you have people that start talking about AV1 encoding for video and all this other kind of stuff. And while this stuff's cool, vast majority of things require a lot of specialty hardware to make work. Modern cameras, I think you are just in general going to see work with modern cameras. You're basically just going to see them work with HEVC, H.264, ProRes. Obviously, there's ProRes RAW out for recorders. Those are pretty much the formats that you have in the market. So you're not really going to see much of a difference there as the industry goes forward. Does everybody want to see RAW in cameras? Yeah. How many people are really going to use that? Do people want to see, HEIC files for stills? Yeah. And that's a probably more realistic thing to see as far as like JPEGs go. JPEGs are a relatively old, archaic format. Seeing stuff like that kind of advance to HEIF or HEIC files would be a cool shift forward, but a lot of it just kind of depends on when these things become a good enough standard within the development cycles of cameras, if that makes sense for people. So, video recording in camera, photo file formats in cameras, they'd all be cool to see get more and more advanced, but it's kind of, we've always been a company that we will release things when we can have a very strong stance that it is a widely accepted and widely usable format, instead of releasing things like HEVC in 422 10-bit, where, so for those who don't know, that's an H.265 file, where your actual editing side of those files is terrible. It is a terrible experience unless you have very specific hardware. It's not something that's a ubiquitous use case yet. And on top of that, the HEVC standard for delivery for like HLG, hybrid log gamma, things like that. Parts of things that we are actually part of creating some of these standards for is 420 10-bit for HEVC files. That's why they play so smoothly on phones. It's why it plays so smoothly on computers. It's why you can directly put it on a TV and it will work, even if it's like a $90 TV that has HLG compatibility. If you throw 422 10-bit in HEVC, now the vast majority of people end up having to either deal with transcoding or sluggish footage, or dealing with having to spend a ton of money in upgrading your editing software, your editing hardware, to support it. So, yeah, that's my rambling thoughts on that one. Derek says, shooting vlog on G100, is there a preferred way of grading in DaVinci Resolve using the vlog LUT provided on the LUMIX site? So, if you're using vlog L on the G100, that camera is an 8-bit camera. So, vlog is not as flexible on the G100 as it is on something like the G9 Mark II, or the S5 Mark II, or S5 Mark IIX, or even a GH5. The thing you have to be careful with that particular camera is just how hard you push that footage in post. So it's more important that you get the footage pretty close to the proper exposure and don't need to really pull shadows up too high on that camera. You can use the LUT that we have available on the Panasonic website, because that is designed for vlog L, and it doesn't matter which camera or bit depth it is. You can use it. You just want to watch where your highlights and shadows are, because 8-bit doesn't have as much information as 10-bit footage does. Wild Ride says, is the 1080p 60 FPS using DFD AF on only on hardware limitation, or can it be fixed on firmware update? We don't have a comment on that one way or another. There's not anything that I have that I can confirm whether it does or doesn't use it. So the system uses the appropriate focusing system based on various different criteria, and that's what it does. Al says, any chance we will see a more practically designed XLR module? Current butchers, any chance to use a top handle? Honestly, I don't know if there are plans to change the XLR one. So, yeah. I know Small Rig makes a top handle that extends up and lets you actually be able to put it on top of the XLR one, and that is something that does exist. It's from Small Rig. Let's see here. Mr. E says, my S5 and S5IIX both output more crunchy images to my external monitors than what is displayed on the flip screen. The shadows are always missing detail. Do I have a setting wrong? Check your luminance values. So you want to check in the video settings. Where is it? You want to check your luminance levels. Make sure that your luminance levels, if you're looking in full range, make sure you've got full range enabled. And then also on the monitor, make sure that it's properly interpreting the footage that you're sending into it. Because if it's not, you can get crushed shadows with it. If you're doing stuff like sending it to YouTube, like this is a good example. YouTube does not use 0 to 255, if we're thinking in the 8-bit space. Doesn't use 0 to 255. It uses the, well, let's do this in 10-bit because I have the numbers here. YouTube does not use 0 to 1023. It uses 64 to 940. This means that if I were to shoot this stream in full range, shadow range, if it looks fine on my on the computer here, when it gets to YouTube, the blacks are going to be crushed way more than I have them crushed in the way I set this up for the show. And the highlights will clip when they clip. So a lot of that really just tends to be a difference in luminance values on the monitor and what the camera's sending out. So Michael says, is there a vlog to Rec 709 on the website? There is. Log to Rec 709. Let me double check here, make sure I point out the right one. There's a couple different. Is it under the LUMIX compatibility charts? There is a... There are... It's pretty much the same LUT between the various different cameras that are all using the full frame sensor. But if we go here, go to digital cameras. And for those that want to know, this is the website that I'm working on. Let's actually grab the link. It would help if I copied it. This is the link that I'm working at for a thing here. So for compatibility, is this the one? So there's the lookup table. All right, this is the VRAW. This is the vlog for raw gamut. Come on, where is it? Vlog. Okay, yeah, here you go. All right, the link I'm dropping here. The link I just dropped in the chat. That is the link that has links to like software, to where like the various different kind of updates and stuff are. It's on the others tab of the firmware update page. You'll see about lookup tables or about LUT. You have the raw output conversion, and then you also have the Rec 709 for Vlog and Vlog L. You can download them right there. That'll give you the .cube file for doing the conversions. Let's see here. Chief says, the only thing I really wish for an S5II is recording 3.2 open gate in camera and outputting 16:9 crop to the Ninja 5 via HDMI. Is that possible in the near future? Probably not. 3.2 open gate, the way the camera records open gate, because in order to do that, what you're asking, the camera would have to be taking the 3:2 aspect ratio signal that it's going to record internally, and then it would also have to encode a 16:9 version of the center of that and send that over to the recorder. My understanding is I think that's a bit too much processing to make sure that it would also be a 10-bit file and that it would keep the quality that we need and it wouldn't cause any problems in the camera. So what it does is it sends the 3:2 out in a 3840 by 2160 resolution container, and it's a 3:2 ratio in that, so you get pillar boxes. So that's how that system is designed to work. Wow, a whole bunch of questions, just kind of where the stuff went. Where was I? Crunchy image, vlog to 709. Here we go, Emerald. I was pleasantly surprised when I got the S5IIX that I could choose between Lens IS and IBIS on lenses, where you can't have both. I had hoped that also translates into MFT. That part I'm not sure of if it translates back to the Micro Four Thirds cameras. As I said, I don't have a OM lens that I can test on my G9 Mark II, so I would recommend asking, on one of the YouTubers that has OM lenses with a LUMIX camera, because they can probably check for you. So, yeah. Hi, Sean. Is there any reason why we don't have tether for LUMIX cameras in Capture One? They have been saying they need help from LUMIX to enable this model. So I can tell you that we have brought that to the engineering team numerous times, and we've been told the same on the other side, that it's up to Capture One. So it sounds like Capture One is saying one thing, our team is hearing a different thing in the conversations with them, so I don't know. I don't know if it is... I mean, let's be honest here. LUMIX published a public SDK that has all the information that a company like Capture One or Adobe or anybody else needs to integrate controlling our cameras over USB. That is public. We made that available when the box cameras came out. So the information is there. I don't know what additional help some might need if they're a big enough company to integrate, because it's public. You just search LUMIX SDK. It's got all the information for camera control, how it connects, what you need, and it's got the kit so that they can build it into programs. We've had many people build programs already that control our cameras, so stuff's out there. Bruce says, just wanted Lumix to consider a vertical shutter release for the G9 Mark II that uses just the internal battery but provides a good grip to keep the camera small. We do have a vertical grip for it. It's the same as the S5 Mark II and the Mark IIX. Same exact grip. It has a battery in it, because truthfully, if we just built a grip that only had a button on it, nobody would buy it. It's a harsh reality of the world of e-commerce. It sounds like a lot of us want it. It's the same thought process on people want cameras that just do photography these days, and that's probably never going to happen because it's more expensive to build a camera that way. And when it's more expensive, less people buy it because in general, people want hybrid cameras. Yes, photo cameras are important, but those video features don't cost anything extra to build the camera. And by taking them out, it would actually make a photo-specific camera more expensive. William Turner, any chance that Panasonic might consider copying move the 30p 6K photo mode 15-minute recordability to the video menu? While not true open gate, it would be nice to have for the OG S5. No, 4K photo mode and 6K photo mode, those have to stay in the photo menus because they are a hard 30 frames per second. It's not 2997, therefore it is not considered video in our perspective. So those are going to stay in the 4K, 6K photo mode menu. Tommy, I know you can't tell us what's coming out, but maybe you can give us a date for the rumored new release this month. Honestly, rumor sites are... There's a phrase that I can't say on here. Rumors are like, everyone has them. If you believe what rumors say day in and day out, honestly, I think people need to start looking elsewhere and getting out and actually photographing using cameras that are out there, because rumor sites in general, they claim that they know all these things. They like to make it sound like they know all this stuff, but the truth is they usually 9 out of 10 times have no clue, and they work on luck. So, cool. I look on the forums too and on the rumor sites because I laugh at the commentary that goes on because it's a bunch of people that think that they know what they're talking about and they don't. That's one of the reasons why I started doing this stream, is because I want y'all to be able to come and ask us questions and actually get real answers and not be bogged down by opinions that get pushed forward as fact. So yeah, that's my thought on that stuff. So, following up from my RTL vlog question before, I'm saying when I use the exact same LUT, they look different. I want to monitor the way real-time LUT shows, but record in vlog. Yes, that's what I'm saying, Mr. E. Real-time LUT is a totally different system the way it handles the LUTs. It is actually processing a RAW or a video file with it, and that is what you are seeing on the screen. Vlog View Assist is literally just applying it over the preview display. We have a patented way that real-time LUT works. It is Panasonic's design. It's our patented way of making it work. That is why it works better. I don't think the biggest thing is that the LUT that you would use for real-time LUT versus Vlog View Assist should be different LUTs anyway. The Vlog to 709 LUTs are conversion LUTs, and yes, you can use them for preview, but realistically you want to use a monitoring LUT, not an editing LUT, for things like that. Okay, before we run out of time, I want to cover the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX autofocus update because I forgot to cover this last week. So in the newest update, version 2.0 for the S5 Mark IIX and version 3.0 for the S5 Mark II, we added a number of new autofocus options into the camera. So if you are coming into the menu this way, where you press the autofocus mode button on the back, that's between the the SC and MF button on the back, you'll see that you now have the option when I go and press display to have human detection that splits into eye, face, and body, or just eye and face. You have animal detection that splits between body only, which is the traditional way that we've done it, or eye and body, which will automatically jump to the eye when the eye is visible enough. And then also car and motorcycle. So these new modes are taken directly from the G9 Mark II and deployed into this new system. Now, a couple points here. If you are doing talking heads work, if you are filming people in general, leave it on eye, face, and body. The reason for this is that it uses more information to make sure that it's looking at the right target and it has the proper information it needs to find the eyes and the face. If you are setting this to eye and face only, it will ignore the human head, it ignores the body, it ignores everything else in the supporting stuff, so that if I literally am sitting like this and then turn my head this way, or turn this way towards the microphone, then it will not track my face. It will go to whatever the general focus mode is that you've got set up. So if you're in full area, it will jump to full area and the system picks whatever focus mode it wants, or whatever focus point that it wants. Most of the time it's going to stay on the subject, but there's more risk in that because it doesn't have anything else additional telling it like, hey, focus here. When you leave it on human, you give it that information that when it loses the eyes, it goes to the head. When it loses the head, it goes to the body, and then reverse the other way. So that is the recommended one to use for that particular setup. The other thing that you'll notice here is that we've split the system up. So in the prior to the version 2 and version 3 firmware, the system would lump human and animal detection together. So if you ran into a situation where you only want to focus on the animals and you don't want the people walking on a sidewalk in front of you, you'd have to contend with both of them. So now it's split out where animal has its own detection mode. So if you have it on animal, it's going to detect animals. It won't put boxes around people. And then car and motorcycle, like we've talked about on the G9 Mark II before, these are modes designed to detect two-wheeled vehicles, primarily motorcycles. In some cases it can pick up bicycles. And then cars, as I was talking about the wrong one that I had highlighted. And then also cars. The car system is what it's really just used to detect the shape of a car. Now, the way these models are trained are more on the sports side of these systems. So sport bikes, MotoGP, stuff like that. Dirt bikes. When it comes to cars, it's things like, GT cars, looking at Formula 1 cars, stuff like that. Everyday passenger vehicles are usually close enough to it, so they're going to be fine. But there can be some instances where a very specific style of like truck might not be recognized. Because it's designed for cars, not, commercial vehicles per se. So yeah, you have that stuff there. When you start looking a little bit deeper into the menus, and the thing I wanted to kind of mention about focus here. So depending on the mode that you're in, if you are in the photo option, you have the custom set options for continuous focus between set 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. By default, the camera is going to be set to set 1, which if you come into this menu, you'll see that it's a pretty basic, general, versatile system. If you are running into situations where like, hey, I want to photograph my dog that's running out back and, playing fetch and stuff like that, set 1 is probably not going to be the suitable one for that kind of scenario that you're photographing. This is where I would actually set the camera into either set 3 or set 4 because animals move really fast. Same with birding and wildlife, or even, honestly, kids. If you're photographing, like, your kid's birthday party or a soccer game or whatever, you want to be able to go in here and change these sets because they can have a drastic change into how the system performs for various different focusing tasks. Now, if you're coming from the video side, you'll see that you have different settings for custom speed and sensitivity. So playing with these things, what you'll see is that a lot of people have been doing some tests online and taking the speed and sensitivity settings that they used on like their GH5 and just blindly applying them to the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, and G9 Mark II. Don't do that. I highly recommend not doing that. The reason for it is that you are making a lot more aggressive changes to the focusing system now that we're using PDAF than you did with the DFD system. So if I were to come in here and set the AF speed to maximum and leave the responsiveness, you can actually run into a situation where you might be causing things like what would appear to be pulsing. It's not pulsing in this kind of category because what you're actually seeing is that every little move that you are making on the camera is being considered movement. So the system is moving the lens so fast because you're telling it that's what you want it to do. If you come in here and you set things like AF sensitivity and you want it to be really responsive, well, now you're making the system incredibly twitchy, which in PDAF can look actually a lot more distracting, because now if you've ever watched the YouTube videos where you have someone animated like I am, and they start moving back and forth, that's where you start seeing the focus like literally jump like this because it's too aggressively set for making changes. There's a balance point between where you want it to look kind of smooth as a person moves back and forth based on the speed of that subject, but also you want it to be reactive. So that's why in the menu we give you those options to make the changes. But like I had said originally, I highly recommend, if you are new to the system and you're still trying to get yourself comfortable with the autofocusing system that we've deployed in all the various different recording modes, make sure AF custom settings is turned off. See what part of the focusing system that you're using looks the way you want it to, or maybe it's not performing where you want it to particularly. If you notice that it's like, okay, it's recognizing and it's switching to subject, but maybe it's taking a little longer than you want it to go to that particular point, then you come in and maybe tweak speed by 1. In my testing in the original launch of this system, in the months that I was working with it before we came to market with the camera, I found that adjusting by 1 number on there can make a vast difference in how fast the speed changes from one point to another, almost to the point that it, well, actually in a lot of cases for me, to the point where I actually really did not like how fast it moved in from point to point. Same with responsiveness. So as you're getting yourself used to the new system, know that you have those tools there. By default, this is turned off, but a lot of the people that you see online, not all of them, and I'm not going to give names, I'm not going to, call out channels or anything, but a lot of users that have been like testing the autofocus and putting it up against the, some of the competition, they're not actually doing fair comparisons because they're preloading in their presets that they've done from the old DFD system. And that, if you're looking at wanting to make a true apples-to-apples comparison, doesn't work because you're not actually testing it. You're testing your custom version of it, not what an average person's going to have an experience with out of the box. So, yeah, I encourage you to play around with those different settings. That's the kind of review of what we've done with the autofocusing update in the camera. I have to, unfortunately, at this point, I have to call the stream. It is a ridiculously busy time for LUMIX this time of year. Lots of stuff that we've got planning and a lot of cool stuff that I'm excited to share with y'all soon. As I mentioned, probably the coolest thing is that we are actually returning back to Cinegear in a pretty cool presence this year, now that the Pro AV team. So that is like our PTZ cameras, the Studio Vericam, stuff like that. Now that we are one group, we're going to have a really fun display at Cinegear this year. So if you are going to be at Cinegear, definitely look for us. I believe if you go onto the website, I believe the show floor plan is public now, so you can see where our booth is. It's going to be a really fun show if you're in the Burbank area, because the show is going to be at Warner Brothers lot this year. Swing by, say hi to us. You know, the normal people will be there. Matt, myself, Neil, probably have a couple other people there as well. So definitely swing by. We look forward to seeing you all there. Other than that, some programming notes. I am away next week, so I will be recording a broadcast for real this time. Actually, I'm doing that tomorrow. That will go up as a premiere for next Thursday at 2 p.m. And then right after that, we'll be back and live here in the studio. So looking forward to see you all in 2 weeks live for another broadcast. Other than that, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Sorry that we didn't get to everybody's questions, but we have the chat replay on this, so I will go through them and try to maybe see if I can actually integrate some of those into the recorded stream that I'll post up for next week. But otherwise, have an awesome rest of your day. Have an awesome weekend. Get out there, create a bunch of cool stuff. If you like the stream, drop a like. If you're not subscribed already, maybe take a look at subscribing to the channel. I look forward to continuing these conversations, and other than that, I will see you all when we get back. And yeah, that was the weirdest, longest outro. So I think I'm done now. Yeah. Bye.